I stumbled upon 3 terrifying true summer vacation horror stories that still haunt me. I never should have opened that door. The moment I did, a chill swept through me, dark and suffocating like a heavy fog rolling in from the ocean. My heart pounded as I stood there, my mind racing. How did I end up here? This was supposed to be a safe getaway, a chance to unwind. Instead, I felt trapped. I was in a small, creaky cabin by the woods. The wooden floors whispered under my feet, like they held secrets I wasn't ready to hear. The air was thick, the musty smell of old paint and dampness surrounded me, clinging to my skin. Shadows danced in the corners, stretching and retracting like they had a life of their own. I tried to shake it off, continue with my evening routine. A warm dinner, a good book. I expected comfort, but unease settled in my stomach. That's when I heard a low, guttural sound coming from the darkened hallway. I froze, my chest tight. The sound pierced the silence, like nails scraping against glass, and my instincts screamed at me to run. I took a step forward, drawn by a force I didn't understand. The shadows shifted, flickering at the edges of my vision. Were they watching me? Suddenly, the floorboards groaned under the weight of something unseen. I jumped, a jolt of fear surging through me. The light flickered, casting chaotic patterns against the walls. My breath quickened as whispers filled the air, distant and urgent, like a crowd murmuring secrets just out of reach. I could feel the walls closing in, suffocating me. My eyes darted around, searching for a source, for an explanation, but there was none. And then, I saw a flicker of movement. A figure, blurred and dark, darting just beyond the threshold of the light. My heart receded, deer caught in headlights. I stood paralyzed. The figure vanished, leaving only the echo of its presence, like a ghost lingering too close. I wanted to scream, to cry out for help, but the words caught in my throat. The eerie whispers grew louder, wrapping around me like thick vines, squeezing tighter. I turned to run, but suddenly the cabin doors slammed shut with a deafening bang. The sound reverberated through me, a promise of doom echoing in my ears. My breath hitched, and the shadows seemed to advance, swirling and curling, hungry for fear. That I stood there, heart pounding like a drum, caught between flight and fight. The only thing I could hear was the rush of blood in my ears and the chilling silence that followed the slam. Wait, was that a laugh? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Panic surged through me as the haunting laugh echoed through the room, a chilling sound that sliced through the oppressive darkness. It was neither joyous nor menacing, just a hollow, empty laugh that seemed to resonate from nowhere and everywhere at once, as if 1,000 voices were layered over each other in unison. My heart raced, and so did my thoughts, darting in every direction like a caged animal. That I turned back to the door, desperate to find a way out. But it was as if something unseen had tethered it tightly shut. I pressed my shoulder against the weathered wood, pushing with all my strength, the chill of the air wrapping around me like icy fingers. The laughter continued, echoing tauntingly, as if mocking my plight. As I stood there, my pulse reverberating in my ears, the whispers became more distinct. They formed words, tangled together in a chorus that felt all too familiar yet incomprehensible. Join us, find the door, forever. I could feel their intention souring the air, thickening it with dread. The thought of joining whatever haunted this place filled me with a cold terror, but a darker curiosity pulled at my mind like a siren's call. That I staggered back, drawn toward the hallway at the far end, where the shadows loomed heaviest. Each step felt wrong, as though I were traversing a graveyard of unuttered fears. With every movement, the shadows pressed closer, fluttering like moths to a flame, their edges sharp and threatening. Above the murmur of whispers, I could now feel breaths cold, unwelcome forming around me, weaving into my own shaky breath, but then, as I approached the mouth of the hallway, the laughter transformed into a different sound, entirely soft sobbing, like that of a lost child. It felt perfect in its guise of vulnerability, disguising itself as a plea for compassion. I hesitated, tempted by the tragic note that rang through the stale air. I took another step, my heart pounding louder than the rustle of leaves outside. "Help me!" it called, pulling me further into the darkness, each word dripping with sorrow. I could barely resist. It felt like she was right there, just a few feet away, invisible yet tangible, waiting for someone to save her from the torment that bound her to this wretched place. Who are you?" I called out, my voice almost swallowed by the oppressive atmosphere. The shadows flickered, retreating momentarily as if considering my plea. "Please, I'm scared." The second-strung together sobs pulled my heart tighter, drawing me into an empathy that ignited my pulse. I inched forward, heart racing, knees trembling. I could see shapes flickering at the edge of my vision, moving with a deliberate purpose, dancing like marionettes on strings that I couldn't see. And then, a sudden chill swept through me, colder than any night I had ever known, as a hand gripped my wrist with a vice-like force. I gasped, feeling fingers that were both ice and fire. They twisted me around, and I came face to face with a figure cloaked in darkness, an absence of light that seemed to swallow everything around us. The face it bore was twisted, a jagged grin, wider than humanly possible, stretching across a void where eyes should have been. "Join us!" it hissed, its breath a wash of foul decay that felt like death itself. I felt myself start to topple back, pulled by an unseen force, my heart hammering furiously as the laughter returned, swellings of malevolence charging the air. The unseen presence was closing in, the whispers coalescing into a singular chant, growing louder until it felt like they were crashing into me, their weight pressing upon my chest. I realized with horror that the choice wasn't mine anymore. It had always been the darkness that decided my fate. As I fought against the tightening grip, a bright flash erupted outside, illuminating the cabin in ghostly light for a brief instant. I turned, desperate to see the source, when a blinding realization struck me. The figure in front of me was not just trying to pull me in, it was blocking the only way out. Suddenly, the laughter morphed into frenzied screams, a cacophony of despair that resonated through the very walls of the cabin, vibrating my bones. I could feel the ground tremble beneath my feet, the air swirling with both dread and fury. My pulse raced faster than the shadows closing around me. In my peripheral vision, I saw a door, the one I had first entered through, swing open, clarity spilling in like a flood. I had one chance. I bolted toward it, heart pounding, only to hear a familiar voice shriek my name from the depths of the darkness. My name echoed, crackling with venom, and I was frozen in place, held captive by the merging currents of light and shadow. But there was a presence now, stronger and more malevolent than before, rising from the deepest recesses of the cabin, a force that had awakened to claim me. I fought to take a step forward, but instead, shadows leaped and spiraled at me with a ravenous fury that offered no escape. I was torn between two worlds, the beckoning light at my back and the suffocating darkness that craved my soul, and amidst the chaos came the piercing question that weighed heavier than the stillness that followed: would I step into the light, or would I finally succumb to the dark? The echoes of my name turned into a resounding roar, drowning out any last vestiges of rational thought. It ricocheted off the cabin walls, a haunting symphony mingling voice and shadow until I could think of nothing else. My eyes darted back to the open door, the only sanctuary in a realm of chaos, but fear rooted my feet to the splintered floorboards. "Join us!" the figure screeched, its features distorting further as if the shadows around it were violating the very fabric of its form. I felt its icy grip tighten around my wrist, forcing me closer, the darkness swirling like a tempest. I could scarcely breathe as my thoughts spiraled into a whirlwind of dread. The very walls of the cabin pulsed, as if it were alive, drawing in my fear like sweet nectar. Just as I summoned the strength to move, the threshold glimmered again, faintly illuminating the path to escape. All around, the whispers morphed into an insidious chant. Stay, stay, stay. It clawed insistently at my mind, threatening to anchor me in an eternity laced with torment. With a sudden surge of adrenaline, I jerked my arm free, adrenaline surging through my veins like fire. I plunged toward the light but skidded to a halt when I realized the figure was no longer where it had stood. A howling laughter echoed from behind me, a wretched sound that slithered into my ears. I spun around, half expecting to confront the creature once more, but found only a void of smooth, unchanging darkness where it had loomed moments before. Panic clawed at my throat as I scanned the room, and the shadows felt alive, swirling around me, curling like smoke from a dying flame. No, no! I shouted into the blackness, trembling with fear. I began retracing my steps, feeling as though I was moving through a nightmare, the very air growing thick and suffocating. Each step backward felt like a betrayal of my instincts. I had to escape. I had to suddenly. Icy fingers gripped my ankles, yanking me down with horrifying force as I stumbled, falling to my knees. The floorboards groaned beneath me, cracking open to reveal a churning darkness, a maw of despair waiting below. I clawed at the wooden planks, desperately trying to hold on to anything solid, but it felt slippery and treacherous, pulling me closer to that formless abyss. No! Not like this. The desperation in my voice echoed like the pleading of a child lost in the woods, but the shadows drowned me out, replaced by sharp screeches joining the chaotic laughter. Glancing back, I saw wisps of smoke rising out of the floor, taking shape, faces twisted in pain, contorted in expressions of horror and betrayal. They reached out to me, mouths agape in wordless cries, urging me toward the pit. Help us. Save us. They screamed, bursting forth with renewed vitality. My chest tightened as I realized they were once like me, prisoners of this cursed realm, now longing for a savior while they clung to the very edges of torment. The horrifying truth struck me: I was not just fighting for my own life, the fate of so many innocents was wretchedly intertwined with my decision. Yet just as I found a renewed resolve, the cold grip released from my ankle, giving me a moment to scramble back to my feet. Panting heavily, I darted toward the glowing door, even as the shadows began coiling around my legs again, weaving a defensive barrier against my escape. Join us! The figure roared in unison with the chorus of souls, now rising closer, an army of ghosts vying for my attention. The sobbing and mocking laughter burrowed into my psyche, overwhelming me with visions of dread. I had no clarity in the face of their combined force that in an instinctive act of survival, I charged through the darkness, recoiling as I felt the press of ghostly hands on my shoulders, trying to pull me back. I gritted my teeth and burst past the threshold, bursting outside into the cool night air. But when I turned to flee, I froze. The cabin was gone. The forest faded into nothingness, a swirling mist obliterating the last remnants of the structure-me sanctuary replaced by an endless void. Confused and trembling, I staggered in place, rage boiling inside me. I had wanted to escape, yet the air thickened with dread as I looked around, realizing I was caught in a swirl of swirling darkness in a boundless chasm. The whispers intensified again, pressing against my ears like a torrent as figures began to coalesce from the mist. From amidst the growing shadows, a singular figure stepped forward, adorned in a tattered garment of despair. But this time, it was not an absence of light, it was a familiar face cloaked in anguish. "You shouldn't have left," it whispered, its voice chillingly serene as I recognized those haunting eyes. "Now they're coming for you and for me." Suddenly, I felt the ground shift beneath me, the very fabric of reality warping as the shadows lunged forward, and terror gripped my heart like iron chains. The abyss opened wide, and from its depths, a low growl echoed a promise of the darkness that was waiting to reclaim what had escaped. Right before everything faded to black, I caught a glimpse of her malicious grin, the last thing I saw as the shadows enveloped me, closing in like a predator upon its prey. I awoke gasping, my lungs filled with the cold night air, yet the taste of ash lingered on my tongue. I was sprawled on the ground, surrounded by the outlines of gnarled trees that clawed at the starless sky. The forest felt wrong, imbued with a perverse energy that crackled in the silence. My heart pounded as I struggled to collect my thoughts, the remnants of the nightmare still sharp in my mind. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if perhaps it had been a horrific dream, the whispering shadows pulling at my consciousness, urging me toward that unforgiving chasm. As I tried to rise, the memory of her smile haunted me, a visage of cruelty that taunted my very essence. The ground felt solid beneath me, yet I sensed an instability, as if the earth itself simmered with suppressed wrath. The once familiar trees now loomed ominously, their branches seeming to twist and writhe, eager to ensnare. No. Get up. You have to keep moving, I muttered to myself, heart racing, forcing my limbs to obey. Yet the darkness pooled around me, thick as fog, and it seemed alive in its anticipation. Each step was a struggle, the shadows slithering at my ankles, almost playful as they tested my resolve. With each movement, the whispers returned, their urgency igniting the tension in my chest. I felt them beckoning me further into the woods, pleading with a sinister familiarity. Join us. They cooed again, echoing the taunts of the figure from the cabin. We're waiting for you. I pressed on, desperate to outpace the cries battling for my attention, until my surroundings shifted again. A clearing emerged, an unsettling juxtaposition to the oppressive atmosphere that clung to me. In its center stood a small, decrepit cabin, one that echoed the design of the one from my nightmares. The air thickened, weighed by an unseen force that held me captive, urging me closer against my instincts. As I approached, I noted the symbols etched into the wood, ancient runes that glowed with a sickly green luminescence, pulsing like a heartbeat. They filled my mind with dread, a gathering storm of revelation stitching together the truths I had desperately tried to escape. Something so deeply embedded here called to the spirits from the abyss, summoning them forth, and then I heard them, soft sobs, muffled cries of hopelessness. Dropping my gaze to the floor, I saw the shadows pulsing rhythmically, like a malignant heart throbbing beneath the surface. A tethered essence began to seep from the cabin, manifesting into distorted faces the anguish and suffering of those bound to this place. They reached out with skeletal hands, their whispers a mix of grief and anger, "Help us." Their grasp on reality weakened, their forms fluctuating like candle flame in an unyielding storm. No! I shouted, backing away, the surge of grief threatening to suffocate me. I knew now that each tortured spirit was part of the greater malevolence, a creature born from despair. The cabin trembled as though responding to my thoughts, and the door creaked ominously, swinging ajar as if inviting me to penetrate its depths. Could I? Was this the key to understanding what had become of me and those lost spirits, or would it lead to my demise? I hesitated, my reasoning battling with the overwhelming urge to help. The very air hummed with desperate energy, electrifying my limbs. I could feel their despair coalescing, the darkness swirling with fervor and anticipation. As I stepped closer, filling my lungs with stale air, I was engulfed by a wave of congruent knowledge, the sacrifice that had been made here to bind those souls. It was as if the cabin itself whispered my destiny. I instinctively knew deep down that stepping inside would either cleanse the haunted spirits or doom me alongside them to an eternity of suffering. Then, piercing through the cacophony of cries, a voice sliced through the pulsating darkness. "You shouldn't have left. You belong to us now." The shadows suddenly lunged, tendrils thick and heavy, wrapping around my wrists and ankles, anchoring me to the spot. I was not alone, I could feel the despair of those trapped souls tugging at my very being, urging me forward, or was it pulling me into the depths alongside them? Terror flooded my veins, and I screamed as the door to the cabin creaked wider, an unseen pressure beckoning me. I felt my body tipping toward that threshold, every terrified instinct shouting for me to run, to fight against the oppressive force that sought to ensnare me. But even as I strained against the pull, I understood that the choice was no longer mine to make. The shadows roared, the whispers crescendoing to a deafening climax, and with one final wail that resonated deep within my core, I was thrust locked in an eternal dance with darkness as the door slammed shut behind me, trapping everything I had once known beyond the threshold of that wicked place. The darkness embraced me like a suffocating shroud, absorbing every shred of light as I stumbled deeper into the cabin. The air turned thick and damp, heavy with the smell of decay. My eyes strained to adjust, settling on the tattered furniture coated in a fine layer of dust and grime. It was as if time itself had forgotten to tread here. The world outside faded into a distant memory. A chill crept along my spine, a malevolence lurking in the corners of the room. I could hear them, the mournful wails of spirits who had lost all hope, echoing in the crevices of my mind. The whispers morphed into a chaotic cacophony, blending with the cries until distinguishing the source became impossible. They threaded through the air, curling around my essence, testing the very fabric of my sanity. That we are here. Join us. They chanted, their collective sorrow wrapping around me like a noose. I pressed my hands to my ears, desperately trying to shut it out. Shadows darted along the walls, flickering just beyond the periphery of my sight. They morphed and twisted into nightmarish figures, each carrying a fragment of despair, each urging me to embrace the suffering. Against my better judgment, I took a shaky step forward. The floorboards creaked beneath me, an ominous protest against my trespass. I moved deeper into the heart of the cabin, guided by a force greater than my fear. That I in the far corner stood an ancient mirror, its surface clouded and crackled, reflecting nothing but an inky void. But as I approached, the glass began to shimmer, and for a moment, a haunting vision manifested within its depths. I could see fleeting images, snatches of my life before the terror had overtaken it. My laughter, my warmth, my promises of forever, each replayed moment twisted and warped into something alien and grotesque. Suddenly, a horrific scream erupted from within the mirror, rending my soul. I staggered back, feeling the vibrations echo through me, an inconceivable pain clawing at my heart. The spirits surged forward, their forms ever more chaotic, shadows merging into a tempest of grief and longing. That he belongs to us. They shrieked, their baleful energies converging, swirling like a storm ready to burst. I could see their faces more clearly now, a mosaic of anguish and rage, their eyes hollow, reflecting the bottomless despair of thousands of souls imprisoned here. You have to stop this. I cried out, my voice cracking under the weight of their collective fury. As I spoke, something stirred in the depths of my own memory. I withdrew, memories flooding back, my childhood in the sun, laughter shared over campfires, promises of adventure. But the celebration of those memories twisted in agony as the wails of the lost souls merged with each cherished thought. As if triggered by my acknowledgement, the mirror rippled violently. The once insignificant symbols on the cabin walls began to glow anew, each rune pulsating a vivid ochre that bled into the air, suffusing it with a palpable energy, feeding the turmoil rising around me. The turmoil coalesced into a figureya silhouette, dark and twisted, clawing its way out from beyond the mirror. Its features shifted, reflecting the grief of those within, an endless loop of horror. Release us. It roared, bathed in despair that threatened to consume me. Or be one of us forever. The air shrieked with its disdain, a monstrous wail that vibrated through my chest and reverberated through the walls, until it felt as though the entire cabin were a living thing fueled by anguish, driven by instinct. I turned to flee, but the shadows lunged once more, coiling tightly around my legs, pulling me into their embrace. My heart pounded, my breath came in gasps as I felt the energy of the cabin pulsating around me, beat of countless souls mingling, desperate for redemption, or perhaps for revenge. Then, like a lightning bolt cutting through the dark, clarity struck me. I realized the whispers were not merely pleas, they were warnings, echoes of a sinister design hidden beneath the surface. They're using you, I murmured, fighting through the haze of terror, trying to reconstruct my own reality. Using me to tether more to this prison. With sheer willpower, I summoned a shout that broke through the chorus of despair. You don't own me. My voice was hoarse, yet it splintered the depths of the shadows. The spirits recoiled for an instant, and I sensed the fracture forming, an opportunity flitting like a dying flame, but just at that moment, the figure erupted from the mirror, solidifying into a grotesque monstera fusion of the spirits, eyes swirling like whirlpools pulling at my consciousness. It extended a gnarled finger toward me, and I felt my mind tear, a splitting sensation that would haunt me forever. Join us. It hissed, the air sizzling as it pulsed with dark energy. We are your family now. Fear surged through me into a frenzied heartbeat as the cabin trembled violently, echoing the turmoil deep within. Something snapped, a thread of reality dangling precariously before me. I could feel the abyss just behind my thoughts, could hear the indistinct cries haunting the edges of my sanity. That I turned to flee, but the walls shuddered, expanding and contracting like a battered lung. Then, with a deafening crack, the mirror shattered, shards flying toward me, reflecting another reality, one where I could see how they had all begun, the very genesis of their suffering, you'll never escape. The creature lunged forward, and with it came a blinding light, an abyss threatening to consume everything. Screaming, I propelled myself backward just as the floor beneath me erupted, and darkness swallowed me whole. I awoke with a jagged gasp, the air razor-sharp in my lungs. I was sprawled on the cold, unforgiving floor, surrounded by ominous shadows that slithered across the cabin walls. The sound of my heartbeat thundered in my ears, a reminder of my fleeting existence. Panic surged through me, an electric current that seemed to awaken the very spirits I had tried to flee. The mirror was gone, replaced by a hollow space that yawned ominously, a portal to secrets still yet unknown. I sat up slowly, painfully aware that the atmosphere shifted. The sinewy darkness no longer felt like an inactive presence, it was charged with anticipation, as if the very walls were waiting for me to make a move hoping to ingest me whole. "Get up," I whispered to myself, but my voice trembled, and doubt tightened its grip around my spine. I glanced toward a dusty window, the glass grimy with years of neglect. The outside world seemed so distant, like a memory barely held onto, sunshine captured in a faint shimmer of a dream, the howling winds outside matched the chaos inside. I approached the window, pulled the curtain aside with trembling hands, trying to lend context to my fears. Outside was nothing but dark, endless woods twisting into a horizon that threatened to swallow the land whole. Skeletal trees reached out, their twisted limbs clawing towards the sky, the very essence of despair. Suddenly, the cacophony returned, mournful wails weaving through the air like a tapestry of sorrow. The shadows morphed around me, coalescing into frayed figures that bled into one another, their forms writhing with pent-up anguish. I stepped back, heart hammering against my chest, but they held their ground, their eyes shining with a macabre curiosity. "You chose to enter," they whispered, a resonance so chilling it froze the marrow in my bones. "Now you must face your truth." That I shook my head, desperate to dispel the shadow's influence, yet their words harmonized with my own dread. I faced the darkened room, and it morphed into a grotesque gallery of my past. Each wall bore portraits of my life, a twisted amalgamation of joy and pain. There I stood in each memory, laughing, loving, thriving. But beneath each veneer was the darkness lurking, waiting patiently for the moment when despair would finally claw its way to the forefront. "Join us." A voice howled from somewhere deep within the cabin, resonating with unholy glee. I closed my eyes, trying to block it out, but with every moment, the memories surged forward, each tear more potent than the last, and then I felt a series of spectral hands, cold and indifferent, grasping at my limbs, their spectral touch sending icy tendrils racing along my skin. I panicked, lashing out, desperate to flail free, but it only seemed to fuel their fervor. "You cannot escape." They clamored, their chorus rising to a fever pitch. "You are one of us." The floor splintered beneath me, revealing rotten wood that reeked of death. The ground was alive with movement, the cabin itself pulsating, eager to claim more souls to its dark dominion. The whirlpool of despair reformed before me, dark figures swirling into grotesque representations of my own failures and fears. My childhood insecurities, lost opportunities, every trauma became a looming specter threatening to swallow me whole. A sudden resolve surged through me. I couldn't succumb, couldn't let them make me one of their own. I stumbled backward towards the door, lunging for the handle, but it was locked tight as if the very essence of the cabin conspired to keep me trapped. "Let us in. You belong here." They beckoned, their voices urgent and enticing, promising solace in the depths of their despair. As I pressed my forehead against the door, the sensations filled my mind, drowning, choking, collapsing into a pit of darkness adorned with echoes of past mistakes. No. I screamed, the word tearing free as a feral snarl. "You are wrong." In a moment of sheer will, I turned and faced the spectral figures again, meeting their eyeless sockets with unyielding determination. "You don't control me," I shouted, the truth of my spirit lighting my soul even in that oppressive dusk. The spirits reeled as if struck, their forms flickering dangerously. A howl erupted from the depths of the cabin, the anguished sounds igniting a firestorm of chaos. They were losing their grip, and I could feel their bond to me was weakening, but just as a flicker of hope ignited in my chest, the cabin convulsed. Heavy creaks echoed through the air, like the bones of a horrid beast twisting and snapping. The walls began to bleed a viscous darkness, and I stumbled backward toward the fireplace, where embers flickered with a ghostly twinkle. A flash of intuition sparked that if I cannot escape, then I will burn this place to the ground. I thought, grasping the nearest item, a rusty iron poker, before plunging it into the heart of the flame, creating a conflagrant blaze that engulfed the haven of sorrow. The shadows enveloped me, their anguished cries rising to a deafening crescendo. As the fire blazed, I felt the searing heat nipping at my skin, but I pushed forward, aiming to sever the chains binding us. However, an overpowering roar erupted as figures surged from the walls, their faces twisting into grotesque masks of rage and betrayal. "You cannot destroy us!" they roared, flinging their darkness toward me. As the flames lunged, illuminating the space around me, I realized with horror that the blaze was not a means of release but rather a tool of their manipulation. The shadows were feeding off my desperation, weaving a tapestry that reached far beyond my understanding. Then, there was a flicker, a moment of clarity amidst the chaos. An ancient symbol appeared among the flames, etched into the floor, glowing with a menacing light. And just as the shadows enveloped me, the last thing I heard was a seductive whisper rising like smoke, "Welcome home." With the shadows closing around me, crouched to swallow my fate, I braced for the abyss. I jolted awake, not on the cold floor of the cabin but beneath a thick layer of suffocating darkness. Panic gripped me as I strained to reach consciousness, a phantom weight pressing against my chest. It was the cabin. I was still in it, its accursed grip relentless. The fiery blaze I conjured flickered like a dying heartbeat beyond a veil, and the insidious shadows cradled me like an eager embrace. With a desperate push, I forced my eyes open wide, gasping for air as the horror unfolded before me anew. The air was thick with the stench of burnt wood mingled with something more acrid, like rotting flesh, hanging in the silence that enveloped me. I could still feel the tendrils of darkness clawing at my mind, whispering fears that burrowed deep into my psyche, alive with forgotten sorrows and regrets. I tried to get up, but the floor clung to me, sticky and warm, like flesh melted by the consuming fire that now danced in the distance. The oppressive shadows loomed close, warping the periphery of my vision. Shapes stalked just out of sight, half-formed beings flickering between existence and void, their hungry eyes glimmering like stars in the abyss. "You will not leave," they rustled, a low murmur that seemed to vibrate within the very foundation of the cabin, unearthing echoes of my own haunted past. "You belong to us now." A guttural growl rumbled again, deep in the bowels of the cabin, as if the very entity itself was awakening, enraged by the flames and the threat they posed. In horror, I pushed myself upright and scrambled toward the source of the light, but my movements felt sluggish. The shadows breathed a dreadful life, pulling at my limbs, anchoring me to this hellscape. With grim determination, I took a step forward, though the entire cabin quivered, threatening to collapse in on itself. Images swirled before me, very regret, every misstep laid bare, unleashed like phantoms from the past. I felt them clawing at the fragile threads of my hope, each grasp tethering me to a fate steeped in despair. But I pressed on, furious desperation fueling my resolve. The fireplace became a singular focus, its embers glowing like a dying sun. I burst into the room, breathless, panting. The flickering flames illuminated the remnants of my surroundings: a tattered rug, a dilapidated chair, shattered glass shards reflecting the glimmer of allure and fear all at once. "You can never escape." The shadows tortured me, writhing closer, whispering intimate darkness that teased my sanity. "The cabin holds your heart." Suddenly, the blast from a tremor visibly rippled through the air. A forceful shriek pierced the stillness, resonating through the wooden beams, as if the very essence of the cabin bled forth in anger. I spun around, clutching the poker tighter, readying myself for a confrontation, but a sharp crack besieged my senses. The floors began to swell, heaving like a live creature, the walls undulating as if alive. With haste, I made for the back door, desperate to escape the storm of turmoil raging behind me. But as I reached for the knob, a surge of coldness washed over my arm. I jerked back, finding a figure blocking my way, a grotesque silhouette, skin dripping like viscous ink, its face devoid of features yet twisted in a parody of a smile. "Stay with us," it cooed sorrowfully, each word sending a jolt of frost through my body. Find peace among the lost that I in that moment, despair coiled tightly around my heart, an instinct screaming for me to flee. I clutched the poker like a lifeline, and before I could think, I swung it toward the wretched figure. The moment it connected, a blast of white light erupted, flooding the room. The shadows recoiled, their howls a cacophony of agony. Light unlike any I had ever seen erupted from the flesh of the creature, causing it to dissolve into a plume of black smoke that writhed and hissed. But I was too stunned to move, caught in the blinding luminosity. Suddenly, the lights dimmed, and amidst the fading haze, a new presence emerged, a figure that didn't belong to this world. It floated ahead of me, half-formed, a flickering essence wrapped in translucent veils of sorrow. The face was familiar, staining my memories with a rush of dread. "Why did you leave me?" it asked, voice hollow and echoing, hanging in the air like cobwebs brought forth by a chilling tempest. "You could have saved me." The realization clawed its way into my brain, and the shadows rushed back in, crying out in gleeful frenzy. "Embrace it. You cannot run from your past." Panic flooded through my veins. The figure's eyes, voids of anguish, locked onto mine, holding a reflection of my deepest fear, failure. In a final surge of will, I turned toward the fire, gathering what remained of my courage. But as I did, the walls began to shudder violently, splintering horror racing through the structure. The air thickened, becoming a miasma of despair. "This is where you make your choice." The cacophony of voices screamed, a shrill tempest that seemed to shake the ground itself. Suddenly, there was a series of loud cracks and groans, and without warning, the roof above shattered like glass, raining debris upon me. My heart pounded wildly as I barely dodged a collapsing beam, realizing the very world around me was erasing my existence. I glanced back at the phantasmal figure, its anguished plea slicing my heart, and then, just as I turned to sprint back to the dormy realization dawning, I found it wide open, revealing a pitch-black void beyond where the forest once stood. The shadows, now alive and shrieking, reached a crescendo, and I knew this was not just an escape. It felt like a final confrontation. "Step into darkness, or stay and be claimed," echoed the spirits, their last promise hanging in the air like a noose. That I hesitated, caught between choices, to face my horrors or to delve into the unknown. And as I made my choice, a breathless whisper swept through the fray, coiling around my heart with a sense of longing. "You do not know what truly lies beyond." With a heavy hand upon my heart, I lunged toward the void, the darkness enveloping me whole. The void swallowed me with a ravenous hunger, an abyss that cradled my uncertainty and fear. I tumbled through a thick darkness that pressed against my skin, heavy and suffocating, but within it, a whisper of unfamiliar energy crackled like static. I sensed the shadows shifting, forming shapes, coalescing into grotesque figures that surged. They murmured like a frantic crowd behind a wall, their words slithering through the fabric of my mind, murmuring secrets I dared not comprehend. Just as I thought I had fully plunged into despair, I burst through an unseen barrier, landing hard on uneven ground painted with a surreal moonlight that filtered through tree branches twisted in unnatural contortions. The forest felt alive, breathing around me, shivering with a cold that sank deep into my bones. It was an alien realm, oppressive yet beguiling, enticing me to delve deeper even as a primal urge to flee tugged at my core. "Welcome home," a chorus of voices echoed, jagged and splintered, their verses clawing at my sanity. I looked around, recognizing this as the warped version of the very place I sought to escape, yet unmistakably different. Trees loomed higher, gnarled trunks twisting like skeletal hands reaching skyward, and the air hummed with a tension that threatened to snap. As I staggered away from the drunken dance of shadows, I caught glimpses of distorted figures peering from between the trees, eyes pinched in delight, lips curled in sadistic smiles, reveling in my predicament. Each step I took unleashed a cacophony of rustling leaves and sinister giggles that trailed after me, weaving through the branches. I turned my back to the chaotic laughter and pressed deeper into the forest, longing for escape, driven by an instinct that whispered of something more terrifying lurking in the depths of this darkened oasis. The ground beneath my feet tripped my progress, roots snaking out like the fingers of the damned, grasping at my ankles, begging me to join their eternal revelry. Suddenly, the air shifted, and a thundering growl split the silence, echoing through the trees. A creature, a monstrous hybrid of shadow and flesh, burst forth from the underbrush, claws glistening like obsidian in the pale moonlight. Its eyes glowed with an insatiable hunger, trained directly on me, reflecting my terror back in amplified waves. It lunged with a ferocity that stole my breath. I instinctively turned, sprinting back toward the path I'd broken, but the shadows twisted, congealing into a treacherous maze. You cannot hide, the trees sang, their voices mocking my attempts to evade the onslaught. You are one of us now, lost forever, I stumbled, falling heavily to the forest floor, my heart pounding like the drums of war in my ears. The beast's growls reverberated through the air, each sound pulsing like an echo of death, drawing nearer, and closer, an echo of a fate sealed. It paused, sniffing the air, its breath hot like sulfur, taunting me with its mere presence. Join us, an unexpected voice whispered, familiar yet laced with something sinister. I turned and found myself staring into the eyes of someone I thought I had lost, a childhood friend, hollow eyes mirroring my fear interlaced with wicked amusement. We've all been waiting for you. No, I gasped, recoiling. The forest continued to blur, surreal shapes writhed along the periphery of my vision, shadows melding into familiar figures drawn from my past. Each visage twisted in despair, they beckoned me closer, nurturing my unwelcome memories with an intimacy only the damned could share. Why did you leave me? The question burrowed deep, echoing in the hollows of my heart. My friend's lips curled into a malicious grin, revealing sharp, elongated teeth. You don't belong there. You belong to us. You belong in the dark. Before I could fathom a response, the growl erupted again, a terrifying sound that radiated through the ground, shaking it beneath me. The beast emerged, thick with raw outrage, slinking slowly toward my fallen form as I scrambled backward, the roots gripping my legs tighter, dragging me toward the monstrous entity. We cannot escape our shadows. The voices weaved together, growing in intensity until the very leaves shivered with menace. They are always with us. Inescapable, my heart thrummed with desperation, a pulsing rhythm urging me to flee. The woods warped, shifting in perspective, every tree a reminder of my insignificance. But then, in diabolical harmony, the shadows twisted into an opening, the dark heart of the forest, an esoteric pathway swirling into madness. Enter, the chorus beckoned, desire and despair intermingling in that call. Face the truth of your existence. The beast was upon me, I felt its hot breath, rancid and unsettling, caressing my neck with promises of obliteration. Panic seized me, a raw, primal fear that surged through my instincts. I had one choice left, to confront this horrifying reality or perish alongside my ghosts. That heartbeat of decision, as the world around me teetered on the edge of the abyss, I lunged for the shadows, diving into the depths with hope clawing for survival against the crushing despair. But as I plunged in, a whirling chaos ensued, the void consuming me but morphing once more into haunting faces, whispered regrets, and a cacophony of screams merging seamlessly into one unforgettable scream. You will never escape us. The darkness roared as I fell down into a deeper, new nightmare I had yet to comprehend. And then, nothing but silence engulfed me, sharply cut as laughter erupted all around, filling the space where hope once lingered. Welcome back. The darkness closed in, suffocating like a shroud, and I realized I was not in an escape at all, but at the precipice of a revelation that would change everything I thought I knew. The weight of silence pressed heavily against my consciousness, smothering any flicker of rational thought. I floated in a void, feeling pieces of myself fray from the edges of existence, pulled into the unknown. The whispering presence remained, an unseen host floating like treachery in the air. It caressed my senses with tales of suffering and despair. Then, a thin thread of light slashed through the dark, a gash in reality that beckoned me forward. I grasped at it, reaching out with trembling hands as though to find salvation. The instant I stepped across the threshold, the light multiplied and I was thrust back into a nightmarish world even more surreal than before. I found myself standing in a decayed version of an abandoned amusement park. The twisted remnants of rides creaked and groaned, as if the ghosts of joy turned to anguish were trapped within. Rusty Ferris wheels towered above me, their carriages swaying ominously, vacant but heavy with memories of laughter now long dead. The flickering neon signs, long extinguished, pulsed with a ghostly glow, briefly illuminating the shadows lurking in the corners. "Come play," a voice squealed from the darkness, a young girl's voice laced with a sinister mirth that made my stomach churn. I turned, heart racing, as a child's apparition clad in a tattered dress appeared among the wreckage, her eyes voids of emptiness. "We're waiting. We've missed you, who are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling as I recoiled from her outstretched hand. "You don't remember?" she chirped, twirling on the spot like a marionette cut loose. "You promised you'd come back." Memories surfaced, long buried in the depths of my mind. I had forgotten so much betrayed by time and the weight of agony. Images flickered, endless summers filled with laughter, vibrant colors now wilted into shades of gray. Innocent games turned treacherous and dark. A chilling dread settled over me as I recalled how we played hide-and-seek here, not knowing the price would be more than just whispered secrets. "This is where they take you," she sang, her voice rising to a crescendo, a pointed finger aimed at the remnants of the haunted funhouse. "They're very hungry. You'll love it." A shiver crawled down my spine as the wind shifted, carrying with it a chorus of furious laughter and the crackling sound of twisting metal. I felt the presence of entities lurking just beyond my vision, watching, waiting, craving my fear. An aching gnawing clawed at my gut as though something within sought to keep me here, to ensnare me in this charade of innocence twisted grotesque. "No, I won't stay," I shouted, forcing myself to step backward, but the air rippled with unseen tension as shadows began to congeal into shapes, forming grotesque apparitions draped in the remnants of lost souls. Suddenly, the screams began, a symphony of pain erupting from the ground beneath my feet. Faces emerged, mouths wide in silent pleas, eyes echoing my own horror. I stumbled, nearly falling into the damp earth. Their hands reached out, grasping at the air, threading through my ghostly memories. "Help us!" they managed to wail, echoing from so many cracks in the world. "You promised. You have to save us." My heart sank into an abyss of guilt as I turned to flee. The amusement park faded behind me as I plunged into a maze of distorted mirrors, and within those reflections, my own visage warped and twisted, cycling through fear, anger, regret, until I could scarcely recognize myself. "Look closely," a voice licked at my ears. "Who do you really see?" I recoiled as the mirrors shattered, their glass splinters capturing the darkness, forming portraits of those I had lost. Each face beloved, familiar now, bore the weight of accusation. "You left us. You let us down." As I spun away, desperation coursed through my veins, and I ran barefoot against broken glass, feeling pain tear through my soles. I darted down corridors of flickering light, heart racing against the pulse of unspoken horrors gathering behind me. But the opening I sought, a gleam of light flickering in the distance, sank further away with each frantic step. "Stay with us." The disembodied laughter echoed through the twisted paths of the park, surrounding me in a choking embrace as shadows surged forward, swallowing the last remnants of the world I recognized. Just as I felt the grip of darkness coil around my throat, my eyes caught a glimpse of something on the ground, an old ticket, yellowed with age, but marked with a date, July 23, 1987. And then it hit me. That night I had never left the park. My breath caught, and as the shadows closed in, one voice broke through. "The game has just begun." In that moment of realization, as dread coiled tighter around my heart, the darkness engulfed me completely, and I screamed, wandering deeper into the abyss, chasing echoes with no destination. As the laughter crescendoed, the amusement park distorted one last time, shadows leached from the world, and everything became silent. "Welcome back," echoed the haunting chorus, "it's time to remember." I stood there, shivering, my heart a wild drum in the suffocating dark. The remnants of the amusement park, twisted and gnarled, faded into obscurity behind me. Each step I took forward threatened to unravel my sanity. The spectral children voices of innocence intertwined with malice lingered in my ears, mocking my every move, urging me to reclaim the joy that had turned rancid with betrayal, but I couldn't trust them. I couldn't trust the shadows. The air crackled with an electricity both beautiful and terrifying, the lingering echo of 1,000 souls ensnared within these haunted grounds. I stumbled, half lost in the depths of memory and regret, the taste of ash lingering heavy on my tongue. They were here waiting, lost to the gluttony of despair. I felt it, tugging at the edges of my consciousness as I pressed deeper into the dark forest of my own making. Suddenly, hands reached from beneath the ground, skeletal fingers coiling around my ankles, icy tendrils pulling me down toward the unforgiving earth. Panic surged through me as I fought to free myself from their grasp. No! I screamed, yanking at my limbs, but they held fast, the earth around me alive with a hunger that echoed the tormented cries of the damned. Return! A chorus shrieked, voices blending into a relentless tide, cracking through the silence. You cannot escape your legacy. Visions flashed before me, memories intertwined with nightmares, every secret ID buried, each fear ID ran from twisted together like thorny vines suffocating any light that dared break through. Rage and sorrow welled within me, dark and potent. With one last desperate cry, I planted my feet firmly. I could feel the warmth of living flesh contrasted against the ice of the dyada dichotomy forged in anguish. You can't have me! I roared, forcing the words past the weight of dread shackling me. As I cried out, a tremor rippled through the shadows, and for the tiniest second, fear flickered in their eyes. Drawing strength from that moment, I ripped my feet free, launching myself forward, desperate to break through the lines of despair that thickened the atmosphere. My heart raced wildly as the shadows howled, clawing at me, trying to drag me back into that suffocating void from which I had escaped. Face the truth. They shrieked, the cacophony swarming my senses, blurring the line between reality and nightmare. But I had seen their faces, heard their cries, felt their despair. They had been transformed by their grief, their very souls caught in the carousel of torment. The landscape shifted again, trees twisting and turning as I dashed forward, desperate to carve out a path toward freedom. But as I ran, I noticed that the ground beneath me started to ripple, pulsating with a malevolent energy. Panic gnawed at my heart as I skidded to a halt when I reached a clearing, painted in an ethereal light deceptively tranquil. At its center stood a tall figure, a towering specter, cloaked in shadows that writhed and danced like flames. Its fascino, my face held a mirror to my deepest fears. Blurred memories flickered behind its eyes, each one more horrifying than the last. My failures, my betrayals, the laughter of those I had lost, each moment of joy twisted grotesquely by time. You cannot run from yourself, my doppelganger whispered, its voice echoing with familiarity and dread, each syllable a shackle tightening around my chest. You are bound to this darkness. You chose to forget that. I shook my head, denying its claim, but it stepped closer, tendrils of shadow curling toward me, entwining around my heart. You cannot escape the choices you have made, it said, a sadistic grin spreading across its features. This is where the past meets the present. You have always belonged to this darkness. That realization hit harder than I thought possible. I had never left the embrace of this place, I had simply veiled the truth in denial, masking the turmoil behind hollow laughter and memories that echoed with a cruel honesty. I was tangled within the very fabric of this nightmare. Embrace it. The figure howled, launching me into the void. I stumbled back, colliding with something solid, the remnants of the amusement park around me shifting and morphing, reconstructing a visceral tableau of my childhood memories. Each joyous moment transformed into whimpers of despair. Visions danced before my eyes, the glowing lights of laughter spiraling into cacophonous screams, the festive colors dragging me back, an inescapable vortex that threatened to choke the last remnants of hope from my soul. My resolve cracked, fear surging through me like fire. And just as the shadows lunged forward, I caught a single, glimmering memory in my mind. The ticket. My ticket. I had to confront what I had avoided for so long. With a steadfast heart, I summoned the strength of every spirit that had whispered in my ear and staggered forward. The winds shifted, howling around, metasembodied voices rising in urgency. Face it. Face it. They chanted, shadows pulsing with energy radiating from me. You are not alone in this darkness. Fueled by that surge of solidarity, I plunged forward. My hands grasped the tangible edges of the ticket. I had seen its fragile paper warm with my memories and thrust it toward the figure that I remember. I screamed, feeling the energies swell around me. You are not my past. You will not define my future. Let them go. The spectre howled in rage, the figure twisting, unraveling upon contact, the shadows converging into a living tempest trying to reclaim their power. The visions exploded around me, revealing not just the loss, but the love as well, an expansion of warmth that blossomed forth, illuminating my heart. That I in that moment, the shadows betrayed the glimmers of longing interwoven within all those chants turned to lament, the echoes fading as I brushed against my own humanity. And as I held strong, my heart beating fiercely against the tides of despair, the darkness around me imploded. That it erupted, tearing the very fabric of reality, blinding me with multicolored light, an array of so many vibrant memories merging into a frenzied dance of freedom. And just as sounds of destruction reached their peak, everything broke apart with a deafening crash of voices conceding, fading like whispers in the night. That I opened my eyes and found myself standing among the trees. The familiar shadows of familiarity ebbed away, revealing pathways leading into the warmth of dawn. My heart thumped louder, but as I looked toward the gleaming horizon, an unsettling chill crept up my spine. I turned back and saw a reflection in the depths of a forgotten puddle, me face, distorted yet familiar, undulating ever so slightly, revealing yet another truth I had missed: the rules. The shadows had only retreated, not vanished. With horrific clarity, I realized that the darkness within me lingered. It wasn't gone. I had merely postponed confronting it, and as I took a step forward, the laughter echoed again, playful and sinister. I stood paralyzed, heart sinking. "Just wait," whispered the shadows from the edges of my mind. "We'll meet again sooner than you think." That I turned to run, but my feet felt heavy, my breath caught in my chest, and behind me laughter turned into a symphony that echoed, relentless, as though they still beckoned me home, forcing me to confront that which still lingered deep within. Nothing was over. In one haunting realization, I understood: the horror I faced was not an escape, but an invitation to join them in the darkness forever. "Join us," the voices whispered, and the chills settled deep, leaving me with their promise that the game had only just begun. The echoes flowed into me, a reminder in darkness, forever taunting with a sick lure. I blinked, firmly enshrouded in the suffocating embrace of shadows, wondering if I would ever truly be free.